Hey, I'm Daniel, and you're listening to another episode of the Filmcraziest Show. On this episode, out of the recently wrapped Fantasia Film Festival, I was able to speak with the minds behind the short film Victim Number 6, with the film's writer, director, and producer, Nancy Menagh, as well as the film's star and producer, Heather Brittain O'Scanlon. Their film is set in 1970s New York and follows Heather's character Donna, who goes out to the bars despite a serial killer stalking the streets. After recently playing at Fantasia, it's just been announced that the film will be playing at the Woodstock Film Festival next on October 2nd, and more info on that will be down below. Thank you for checking out the interview, and here's Nancy and Heather to introduce the show.
I'm Nancy Menagh, and I'm the writer, director, and producer of Victim Number 6, and you're watching the Filmcraziest Show.
Hi, I'm Heather Brittain O'Scanlon. I am the lead actress and producer of Victim Number 6, and you are watching the Filmcraziest Show.
Cool. And I'm Daniel, the host of the Filmcraziest Show. It's great to have you here to chat about your short film, Victim Number 6.
Thank you for having us.
Cool. So I'll start with a couple of Fantasia questions, just as it's just premiered as part of the Born of Women program. And I know we were talking a bit about it before the recording. So I'd love to just get back into it a little bit and just, so how important was it for both of you just being a part of that Born of Women program that kind of highlights women and female filmmakers?
I would not have seen this question come. No, I'm just kidding. We did talk about this before. So do you want to go first, Heather?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, to start off, just to be selected at Fantasia at all blew my mind. I know Nancy feels the same way. Just, I mean, Fantasia is quite possibly the most, like the premier best genre festival in the world. It's a big deal. And then to be in the Born of Women block, I felt truly honored. Like the films we saw were incredible. It felt special being a part of that block. And just truly, a big honor. It's like I'm riding a high all this week. What about you, Nance?
Well, you know, we were talking about this, but you know, something that I feel is, you know, I've never really been in a block where it's like I'm on the stage, the Q&A, and I look to my left and I look to my right and it's all women. And I think, you know, recently we just had a screening and I looked to my left and my right and it was all men but me and Heather, which is fine. But I think that women, you know, women's voices have sort of been historically marginalized as well as other, you know, diverse voices in the film industry. So when you have a block that's just devoted to let's showcase like what these women are putting out, the kind of work they're putting out, I think, you know, if you think about even the Academy Awards, that there's really not been that many female directors who have been nominated or who have won, and that's starting to change. But I think you don't see it that much. And to sort of have these really strong pieces, which I mean, I know that women are capable of doing anything a man can do, maybe sometimes even better, you know, partly because people have told us maybe that we couldn't, or, you know, that's sort of the vibe. I mean, even growing up, like I went to an all-girls school, you could do whatever you want to do in life. There are still things ingrained in me that, you know, I don't realize is because I'm a woman. So you get on a platform where all these other women are making these awesome projects and you're seeing them one right after another, and it's just strong work. It's really exciting, you know? I don't often think of myself as a female filmmaker, but I know I am a female filmmaker, and that's how people, I guess, view me. But I don't differentiate in my mind between myself and any other filmmaker. But is that a good thing? You know, in some ways, maybe not, because I think we should be highlighting, you know, female led productions. And there's a lot of really strong works out there. And I think it's to be celebrated when you have somebody who's saying something different, or, you know, I'd love to be part of more blocks like this, basically, you know.
Yeah, it was inspiring.
Okay.
And also to have conversations with other female filmmakers, like, you know, the dynamics are just different when you're a woman out in the world, or, you know, when you're negotiating, or, you know, it just sort of, you realize it after a point that things are different when it's run by a woman versus when it's run by a man. And I like to hear from them too. What is your experience? Like, what's that been like? So I just think it's like, I love the exposure to these women, and I love, being on a stage with them, metaphorically, because we're on Zoom a lot, these days, but it's really exciting. I think it's exciting. I have a lot to say about it again. But yeah, it's really cool. And I'm very, honored by being in Fantasia, period. But this was just like extra cool for me, to have your film chosen as one of 8 films in a block that's all women, and your film was one of the ones that like, yeah, let's put that in here. I have goosebumps. It was so exciting. It was really great. It was such a huge compliment.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think it is. Sorry, I always have a frog in my throat. And I think it is interesting because like there would never be like a program called Born of Man, I guess.
Well, every program is born of man except the one that decided to be from where. No, I kid the men, but you're right.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I'd also love Heather. Just that came out weird.
Well, thank you. I love you too, Daniel.
I'd love to ask, just what was it like playing a character like Donna, just with all of them? Because a lot of these shorts felt like female empowerment and just playing such an empowered character.
Honestly, it was inspiring. Donna had a tough childhood. She overcame a lot of odds. She had a successful career. She had friends. She was outgoing. She overcame a lot to become the woman she was. And I found that inspiring. And I drew strength from that, honestly. She had a lot of layers to her. And it was, frankly, it was really well written. Nancy did a beautiful job. Bravo, Nancy. With writing this character. And Donna is the kind of character that an actor would dream of playing. Like truly, she was nuanced and layered and very real. And a lot of the credit for that goes to Nancy. And it was just a thrill to be able to step into her shoes for a period of time. And the hair, I had the feathered hair, I'm sorry, and the clothes, the 70s, the whole retro vibe, that was a lot of fun too. That was like the cherry on top of Donna. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, before we get into I have a bunch of questions for like the 70s of it, but I'd love to just pop into your guys' background a bit and just, I have to look at my questions because I have to look at the titles, but I saw for you, Nancy, I saw that you did a short, you were an art director and set photographer on one from 2010 called One Afternoon. So I'd just be curious if there was anything on that set that made you want to catch the directing bug.
So actually, I went to film school. I went to NYU, and you sort of start off with like your core classes, and then as you go on, you can kind of go into whatever niche. But they want you to have like sort of a rounded education and like storytelling and all this. One Afternoon was a classmate of mine was making that like during the summer between our freshman year and our sophomore year. I just totally forgot like where you are in your years when you're grad. So that was something that we just did sort of as a fun side thing. It wasn't like part of school, or it wasn't really like after school, like a bigger production. It was something like he asked me to participate, and it was much smaller in scale. So I certainly would never be advertising my skills as like an art director, although it's a really cool job. And I have art PA'd, later on, different things like that. But I would say like I was always more interested, I think, in the directing side of things, or maybe also writing. Writing is maybe after, in terms of my passion, would be like directing would be on the top. But I have more of a pragmatic, more like of a producer or like assistant director kind of mentality about things, probably because both of my parents were lawyers. So they had much more, I had sort of that type A brain mixed with somebody who really loves to do the creative stuff. But I think it's my type A brain that makes me want to direct, because I'm like, I get to kind of pick everything and complete my vision sort of thing. So it sort of is, that's sort of how I gravitated towards this area of like writing, directing, producing is sort of like, well, I'm writing it, so it's my idea. directing it, I'm bringing my idea to life, and producing is like, I'm too anal to like let anybody else do anything for me. So I like OCD about everything. So, but yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of fun working in, as a PA or working in these different types of jobs, but much to my chagrin, I'm out there producing movies that are like so complicated, like, so that it was really nice to have Heather on board, because producing something totally on your own is tiresome and very demanding, and I've done that as well. So I was like, going into this, having a partner was really great for me, because I'm like, I'm tired. I'm always doing my brain. So that's kind of how that whole thing. But that's interesting you like saw that. I haven't thought about that project probably in eons.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, glad I can take you down memory lane a little bit.
Yeah.
And Heather, going down your memory lane as well. I was just curious because I was just looking at both of your filmographies, and I saw that you had a few credits like earlier in your career, and then you kind of 10-year-ish hiatus, and then you came back to acting in 2012. So
you did a deep dive. Look what you did. I did. It was something I did when I was younger, high school, college, and then after college, moved to LA and did some extra work, did a couple of small things. I mostly waited tables, honestly. At 21 years old, I was rather aimless. I knew I wanted to act, but I really didn't have the direction. I wasn't asking the right questions. It didn't occur to me to ask questions. It wasn't my time. It really wasn't. I ended up saying, I need a, quote unquote, real job and a 401k and health benefits and a regular paycheck. So I went and did that for a while. And it was great. I started my family. I moved back to New Jersey. And that was good for the period of time that I did it. But then the itch started coming back, the acting bug, it never truly leaves you. And I always said it was something I'd return to one day. I'll be like the little old lady on Titanic, and she finally goes up and she receives her award, that'll be me. But it came sooner than that. I got back into it. So I guess maybe that was like, I don't know, 9 years ago. You know better than I do, Daniel, when I got back into it. But I started, started with community theater. Then I started submitting through Backstage and Actors Access and taking classes. And then it just kind of snowballed. One thing led to the next thing, led to the next thing. I started out doing student films. And one of the first projects I did, Nancy directed her senior thesis, As It Seems. And that is how we met. And that's the first time we worked together.
Okay, cool. You guys are in my mind, because that was actually my next question, just like bringing it together, how you guys started working together. So that's interesting that it was your senior thesis. So how did you guys connect? Like on Facebook or?
I did
Backstage.
Yeah, I did a casting because, with NYU, it's like, they want you to like do everything the right way. So with the senior thesis, you have to pitch the project and you have to do everything sort of as they say you should do if you were really out there in the world, like producing. I mean, with the support, obviously, of the institution in certain ways, but in other ways, like, you still rent. If you need more equipment than what they give you, you go out and deal with it. So that it's nice they give you the support, but still want you to go out there and do it. Heather replied to one of the casting calls. She came to NYU. I had like a room that I had rented, and she came in, and it was like one of those things. I'm like, this is the person. And then you came back, I think, to read once more, but it was pretty much, I think, a foregone conclusion in my mind. But since, it's your senior thesis, I'm like, let's just have her come in and I'll hear it again. And then that was it. And we were working together.
Yeah.
And it was I didn't actually, I think, know that was the beginning of her re-entering the acting world. So I didn't realize that, and she came in, and it was just, it was a great experience. I had a great experience making that. And then
I loved it. I had a great time.
Yeah. So that was like that, how we overlapped. And then, we had the festivals for that and whatever. And it's been friendship since then.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And so what drew you guys to working together again? So just because you had that continued friendship?
Yeah, we definitely stayed in touch and became friends through working. I think our friendship really started after the shoot. The shoot went great, but it was through post-production and then the festival circuit that our friendship really grew. And then we have a mutual actor friend named Russ Rousseau. And Russ and I were out to lunch one day, oh, we should work together. Yeah, we should work together. What should we work on? I don't know. I have anything. I don't have anything. Do you have anything? No. You know who we should ask? Let's ask Nancy. She's always writing something. Let's see what Nancy has. So I called her like that same day, and her little like twisted, beautiful mind started working. And she just came up with the idea of this story. She kind of pitched the idea and I loved it. And like within a week, it was short. You had a really solid draft.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I mean, cause when you call, it was really quick because I didn't have anything sort of in my mind. And I was in the car with my mom and I'm like, what about that? Like, what about this? And then, I wrote probably the first draft and then, you sort of tweak and you go as you go along. And slowly I had like a 20-page, I'm like, we're not going to fall into that trap again of 20-minute story. And here we are, 20-minute story again, but 10 minutes is too short. I have a hard time with length. I can't, I want you to feel like you're in the universe. So, but yeah, that's sort of, Heather really was the one who sort of came on my radar and was like, let's do something. And I'm like, okay, yeah. I'm into it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I think you did need, oh my gosh. I always voice crack. I feel like,
and you blush too. It's really cute. Yeah, you do.
And I always call attention to it too. I was gonna say, I think you did need all 22 minutes to tell the story, and I don't mean that as a bad thing, but I think every minute is deserved, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, you certainly don't want to torture people with unnecessary content. So, but it's, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like you just need more. I think it's a tricky medium short. Some people try to do too much in a short amount of time and it's chaotic. Some people aren't doing enough in an ample amount of time and it falls flat. So it's a balance when you're working in a shorter format because, you're not going to, otherwise you'd write a feature, right? So
sure.
I think it's hard sometimes. I think, one of the things I always think is you have to have like a certain kind of brain to be able to do a short. It's actually not easy, one would think, just because it's short. But I think a trap you can fall into really quickly is trying to accomplish too much or having too many sort of end goals, too many storylines that you need to tie up sort of ends for and not having time to do it, or, so I applaud anybody who can go out there and have like a really strong short, because I don't think that's an easy thing. Personally, that's my opinion.
I agree. Like if I were to ever write something, I write very long. So I feel like I would be like, oh, let's make a short. And then it turns into a feature.
Yeah. So, and that happens. I have friends who say, I started this as a short, now I'm 60 pages in. And, you can't, when you have something that needs that much, you're doing yourself almost a disservice by trying to make it something it isn't. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so I appreciate that it didn't drag, or that it accomplished whatever it was set out to accomplish.
Cool. Now, would you ever have plans for a feature for Victim Number 6?
I wouldn't be against it. I have I'm working on another feature, a different idea that I've been ruminating
dark,
on.
Twisted idea, and it's amazing. You gotta finish it, Lance.
It's another dark twisty. I think Victim Number 6, I think, has good bones that it could be a feature. I think the concept of it could be. I haven't played around with how I could adapt the idea, if that makes sense. But I think my opinion is I think it would make a good feature just from the bones of it. And you can really, and part of that too is that you set, the universe. I personally am very excited by the universe that these characters are walking through, and doing something a little bit different in that kind of, genre and in that world. So it's definitely not something I would be against doing. I haven't really actively been working on it, if that makes sense. But you know, it's a little kernel in my brain that may pop at some point. You know, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay, cool. Now I'd love to ask about the 70s and that setting. And I figure I'll start with this one there because we brought up
Russ.
thank you.
He's
Russ
got a
Russo.
tricky. He's got a tricky name because it's his first name and then his last name with just an O tagged on. So sometimes even I'm like Russ Russo.
Russ
Here we
Russo,
go.
superhero. I'd
Yeah.
love to ask that did he have the 70s porn stash before the film, or did he grow it for this?
He's really
grew it.
talented with hair growth. It's really spectacular. I
No, that's true.
remember like we were going to shoot it in April, and I think in January or something he went and got new headshots and had shaved all of his hair off, and Nancy was like, no. It was like, oh, don't worry, my hair grows really fast. And sure enough, I mean, you saw 4 months later what he looked like. So
I was scared.
just
I got
blessed.
nervous. I got nervous with Russ. At a certain point, I was like, dude, you don't have a mustache. Your hair's really short. Like, I don't know how this is. Because we like had been talking about it for like months in advance, and like this is the vision. But he grew it and he did it fast. So I don't know how he did it. You know, if he took like hair growth pills or something, it just was like overnight.
Blessed. You should like bottle that and market it.
Yeah. Well, because you know, the other thing is the guy who played the bartender, Brian, he months in advance, I was like, well, you know, he had a weird hairstyle. It's not weird if he's watching this, but it was like shaved along the sides and then sort of almost like a bouffant or pompadour type thing. And I was like, you're going to need to grow out the sides. Like, that's not really, so just be mindful, I said. He didn't shave or cut his hair for like 6 months. And he showed up to do his haircut for the film. He looked like a billy goat with like hair going everywhere. And somebody was like, did you ask him to grow it? I was like, no, he just took his role very seriously. So it's like the two ends of the hair spectrum there. I just always think that's hilarious.
That's great. For your hair, did you said it was feathered, right?
Yeah.
I guess that was just kind of hairstyling on the day kind of thing, because the hair.
So yeah, Amina Mitchell did the hair for the whole cast. Okay. So prior to set, I went to my normal hairdresser and had her cut the layers in it to facilitate that style a bit better. But yeah, Amina would show up every morning, would throw my hair back in the curlers. I'd go and sit in the makeup chair, get my makeup done while she did everyone else's hair. And then I'd come out and she would just zhuzh it every day. And it was like the hair I wished I had when I was in middle school. Like, oh, I thought that would have been so cool. I was never good at doing my hair, and it definitely never came close to looking that good. Like, I got to be the cool girl in this movie that I wished I was when I was in middle school. That's what actually just happened.
That's a cool opportunity. Just really love that, you know. Now, for a short film, is it harder to get the costumes for like a 70s era film?
Not when you have Amanda Carmona as your costume. We had a great team. We really did. Amanda was great, right, Nance?
Yeah, you know, we talked a lot. First, everything involved, you know, everybody was so involved. It's like we had Pinterest boards, we had mood boards, source photos. So with the costumes, it sort of boiled down to conversations with our costume designer, Amanda, and saying like, well, this is the kind of character this is, right? So Bruce is in his like sort of, I don't even know what that's called.
Leisure suit.
Yeah, he was wearing like a leisure suit. So it's like, we have a conversation of this is the kind of guy he is. So he's going to show up and try and be Mr. Suave or whatever. And so talking to her, she then came up with, here's what I would maybe go with for these types of looks and whatever. And she had some stuff, and I think she sourced a lot of things, and she would be sending me eBay listings and do you like this? Do you like that? So even if one thing in particular, I remember with Heather's costume, they initially were going to be switched. So she had floated, I think, the sort of morning outfit where she's wearing sort of a red
with the red top. Yeah.
She had sort of presented that, and I was like, well, I don't know, maybe we could switch them. How do you feel about that? And she's like, I'm fine with that. And you know, her skirt, the patchwork was like, she sent me a bunch of listings, and I said, this is sort of the vibe. We're going with cool, like as you said, cool girl, like out on the town. But I mean, you work with good people and you give them sort of what your budgetary parameters are, and right up front, before you even have them signing on, like, is this something reasonable? What do you think you need? Having those conversations, and then working closely together to sort of like craft the character and how that presents, whether it's costumes or even set design. Donna's apartment, what is this character all about? And how do we sort of send that message through in these other areas that aren't just personality or script or dialogue? And yeah, I mean, we worked with really talented people. So if it's hard, if it's a tricky thing, it didn't feel that way, at least with the way that working with Amanda played out. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, she did a great job, and she found things, also that were within budget. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. And I'd love to also ask about the bar. Just where did you find that? What was it like lighting that to make it feel very 70s?
Well, Heather and I did extensive research, going to different bars.
It was tough
hard work.
Yeah.
After maybe, I don't know, between Heather and I going together, and then there were a few I went to maybe on my own, because I'm like, we can't coordinate going out all the time. But it was maybe we had seen like 10 places. We had a place in mind of that list that we had seen. And I don't know why I had seen this bar, and it was way like 150 something street all the way uptown. And I'm like, I don't know. I just really have to go check it out. Like there's something was like in me. Heather wasn't there with me, but when I went, I was like, Heather, like, we're emailing these guys, like we're emailing this bar like now. And it worked out. And
the Honeywell is the name of the bar, by the way.
Yeah. And so it worked out partly, the great thing about the bar is it's sort of designed to be like a 70s throwback. So you walk in, you really do feel that vibe that you're sort of in a different time, and it's an amazing place. And they have the lighting was very influential, I think, on how we wanted to light the scene, because all the bar stuff, it's very warm tone and golden, and it really sort of presented that way. So Spike, who's our cinematographer, came in and was really working with the lighting that was already in the space, and then sort of supplementing that if we needed to add, a key light or something, somewhere to kind of offset some of that color, we would add that. But I think the lighting that was in the space was also LED, or it was something that worked in his favor. He was like, we would be lighting like this anyway with these kinds of sort of like lights that they have matched something they had there. So he's like, we're just going to offset anything that's too strong, we'll offset. And, I think he supplemented by, he threw in some smoke, to everything. And we had to, I think, put trash bags. There was one of these like glass walls almost that faced outdoors. So since we were shooting at overnights, going into the daytime, everything's supposed to take place at night. There'd be a certain point in the day where you'd see light coming through. So, I mean, Spike was great. He's like throwing up trash bags and supplementing lighting. And I mean, he really like went in with a game plan of like, here's how we're going to do it all. And the location really lent itself to being manipulated in those ways, because, we weren't making it something it wasn't. It was very much working in our advantage as well.
I also want to give a shout out to Spike, who lit up the whole film beautifully. He just won 2 Best Cinematographer awards back to back at the Woods Hole Film Festival, and also at the Long Island International Film Festival. And that was within like just the same week. It was, so this last week was a really big week. And then we were at Fantasia the next week. It was like, wow. Yeah.
Yes, Spike is a really wonderful person, on top of being very talented. So for me, especially because I've known Spike for several years, it was very like gratifying to see his work being celebrated like that, because there's nobody, when you just meet a nice guy and you're like, you deserve that, man. Even if he didn't deserve it, like he deserves it. And on top of that, like he did such amazing work. So it's like, my heart is full when the work is being celebrated, because everybody put in so much time, effort, and they're so talented, you know, that it's just, I'm very gratified to see the acknowledgement that of the work, if that makes sense, for them. Like, it's just exciting for me.
Okay. Yeah, because his work and your work definitely comes through. Like, it feels like, even though it's bar set, you could totally feel like that it's like all 1970s New York. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you. Well, that was the goal, and I'm glad we achieved it.
Did you have any like visual inspirations for that, or was that just that collaborating with Spike?
So when Spike and I were meeting to talk about the film, I had already kind of come up, and it sort of, this blends into all these other areas, like with production design and costuming as well, because I really was getting a lot of sort of source photos or like inspiration photos of, this is really the vibe we're setting here. Interestingly, when I was thinking about this, if you think about 1975, two movies that came out in or around that would have been like Taxi Driver and Woody Allen's Manhattan. And those are two very different films. So when I was conceiving this, it's like, we want Taxi Driver. We don't want, but it's an interesting thing that this time period could be portrayed in such very divergent ways. So that's why, especially for me, I'm like, we want gritty New York City. We want the crime. That's really the vibe, is really that sort of seedy underbelly of, you know, the streets are dirty and there's people living on the streets and the subways aren't safe. Like, that's the vibe. So a lot of what we did was talking about lighting that is going to accentuate sort of that sort of end of it. Things are a little grungy, a little smoky, a little, you know, not totally clear sometimes. You know, I like seeing the shots where they're sort of tucked away in a back booth, you know, because it's that feeling of everybody's sort of off and you don't really know, that sense of everything's kind of disconnected, as opposed to I can see everything and everything's very clear, and, you know, I can see the skyline. So those conversations really went into, like, when we're having the newsstand scene, that's really sort of dark and cool, and the tones of that lending themselves to a moment where we're acknowledging right off the bat what we can expect, which is, this is a serial killer film. You know, it's not a well-lit street. She's standing alone, and, you know, somebody coming up behind her is enough to make you jump. So we kind of had those kinds of conversations and setting tone, and you know, back in Donna's apartment, even, how much are we seeing? What is the mood? You know, certain things we overlit and then dimmed it down even at times, because, you know, I just wanted it to feel a little creepy, a little shadowy, a little whatever. But Spike and I we talked a lot. We were often, you know, we were in conversation all the time. Everybody was, you know, talking all the time at various points about what we're trying to accomplish, tone, mood, character, and how all of the decisions that we're making go into that. So Spike and I, you know, we had a lot of working lunches as well, where we're going over shots, what shot is going to work to accentuate this, what's not. And, you know, his team came in and it was like, you would never guess. They just throw stuff up. And I'm like, oh, okay. I feel like, you know, everybody made it so easy, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm exhausted. I'm doing this paperwork, that.
We did a year of pre-production. A year of pre-pro is exhausting, but when you do that and you have the good team to support you, the shoot actually went very well.
Smooth. Okay. I've never seen such a thing. It was offensive. I'm like, why? I was like, nothing went wrong. At the end of the project, I was like, I think I did like an Instagram story, and I'm like, that everybody is good at their jobs and nothing went wrong. Like, annoying. It was annoying, because I'm like, how many projects have I been on? Have we all been on? It's like, that goes wrong. This goes wrong. This was like, you know, Kismet saw fit to make it not so tedious in some of the ways it might normally be.
Yeah.
How long was the shoot?
4 nights.
4 nights.
Yeah, I would say 4 days.
It was over 5 days, but it was all overnight.
Yes, because I think we were trying to give us a little bit of a breather, and there was some setup of one of the
exterior stuff we did.
Yeah,
we did it like a day break. So because you have everybody working all overnight, I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't want
It was
anyone
rough.
to like pass out. Like I want everyone to feel rested. And two, for us, because when you're working on like the production side and the creative side, like everyone's going home at the end of the day, and you're like, do I have my permits? Have I printed out what I need for this? So for like everybody's sanity, you sometimes
Mhm.
just need to make sure you have extra time.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, I'd love to ask about the serial killers. Just what was your research like, Nancy, with serial killers?
Oh, a lot. I did a lot of research. Some of it was, like so I will level that I did a lot of research and doing research into FBI profiling of what are the sort of, you know, uh, characteristics or personality traits and how men and, different things about the mentality of somebody who goes in and does these kinds of crimes. And part of that was also doing, I read different police reports, specifically about Jeffrey Dahmer. So his police reports and some of the things that were written. I might even still have a couple pages just because some of the stuff I read was so peculiar. Like it was interesting. I don't need to get into it, but some things where he's saying things and it's just like I couldn't really understand it, and saying things in such matter of fact ways that it was almost fascinating to be like, this is something that really happened. This is how somebody's really operating or thinking about things. But I specifically did a lot of research on Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, and sort of marrying like the different psychologies of those two in particular into inspiration for this project. And less pleasant would be sort of means of disposal. Not like, I don't really, I don't want to get too into it, but
Please get into it.
there's I think
Please get into it.
one of the things that I had specifically done was I wanted to see ways of getting, with Jeffrey Dahmer, he basically sort of like sludgified his victims and removed them in trash bags. And what he used to do that, and my conception was a little different, because when you're thinking of sludgifying, you could use either, I'm going to show my hand here. You can use it like an acid or a base. And oddly enough, a base probably does a better job. And I know this because I've seen scientists basically taking organic materials, not human organic materials, but showing what is the end result of doing one versus the other and how that works out. So as in-depth as that is kind of where I went with it, and doing a lot of research on like, just sort of more the science, the real, to try and make stuff. I don't like when it's like you've injected somebody with something and we don't know what it is, and they just happen to be pliable for your purposes perfectly. It's not realistic. I one of the things I looked up was even paralytic agents, or doing research on that, for example. And something I didn't know is when you use a paralytic agent, it paralyzes the organs as well. So you're really going to just kill somebody because they can't breathe, which isn't what, my purposes for this would have been. So even just doing that kind of research of like, what is this character? What could this character have access to? Or like, what would this character potentially be using as the means of getting rid of their victims, and that sort of stuff. And then following those questions, because I'm a normal human who does not have this experience in my life. So following those questions of not really, if I didn't know anything and I was going to, not that I am going to embark on this journey of, if I wanted to do this, like what would be the way that one could do this? And for me, I don't like in a movie when I call it like the bad Bond villain. It sort of is like the villain has set themselves up so that whoever it is that they're overpowering or whatever can escape, whether that's they put them in a room where there's some kind of item that could be used as a weapon, whether that's they reveal their plan so that the person knows everything and can thwart it. I that annoys me to no end, and I know why.
Oh, really?
I know why people do it, because you want the person to succeed, so you give them a way to succeed. But for me, if I'm clever and I want to kill somebody and I want to get away with it, what steps do I need to take to make sure that that's possible? so that my victim or whatever. So I really went into it also with, if I wanted a foolproof way of succeeding at this task, how do I set it up so that my character can do that, and set it up the scenario so that they have thought about this and planned ahead for these different eventualities. So that's how my brain works. So a lot of my research was going into, if I'm somebody who wanted to succeed at this kind of task, what are the things that I will be thinking about those things, researching them, and then integrating that into how I'm thinking about how this character is operating. So that's a lot of information to say. I do creepy research and I really overthink things. And sometimes I'll even be playing with one scene over and over. I don't like that they use, I think at one point I thought about using like ketamine as the agent or something, but if you use this, it does this. I'm one of those. I annoy the heck out of myself because I'm like, but ketamine can fail because of this and that. I'm sitting in my house and like writing a script like this. I'm glad no one's around when I'm doing it, because I'm going to my mom, because I live with my mother. So I'm like, Mom, I'm having a problem because they can't paralyze them and they can't use ketamine. She's like, what? What is this? So that's, I mean, I think it's important when you're writing something that's based in a real world situation. This isn't like sci-fi. This isn't, there's a lot of information out there that can help you to make the scenario as real as it can be. And that's really a huge important thing for me, is what is this world like? This has to be authentic. If you're sloppy with that, then there's no point in writing it, because you have to take care to really know what you're talking about. If I don't know the answer, I shouldn't write about it. So unfortunately, I know too many of the answers now, but that's what went into it. And some of it was sad. Like some of the research, it's hard to read, or it's unfortunate. Like it's not a great topic, but if I want to write authentically, I have to understand what I'm writing about and, the kinds of people who it is we're talking about. So I take that seriously.
Right. And I mean, now Nancy is on an FBI watch list, but like, you're really friendly with them. Sometimes you bring them coffee while they're outside watching your house.
I get random IMs that just appear and it's like, how you doing? We haven't seen you outside today.
I was literally about to say, like you get paranoid that the feds are watching your search history going through all of that?
I don't know. One would think I probably am they probably kind of check in every now and again. She's still Googling us and like, but to be fair, the FBI, some of my research was documentation that they had out. So one of the things was, I don't really remember what it was specifically, but it was an FBI document that was like, it was as if they were teaching a master class on serial killers. So these are the profiles. The main ways that people kill are this way. That's
their trap. That's their trap. If you find that article,
I'm gonna go out there with it's you who did it, not me. No, I mean, I guess they could. I know this is the first time I've ever thought about it.
Oh no, now
Nancy. You have to throw out like you have to do a Google search, like I'm a filmmaker, LOL, do not worry.
I mean, and it's funny because the Heather mentioned the feature. There's things in that's sort of, I don't want to reveal anything, but there's things in that where if I'm Googling, they're either going to think I'm some kind of like religious fanatic or I'm trying to kidnap people, or so it's like, I don't think about it too much, but maybe I should go incognito every now and then.
I'll just say that I've done an interview for a film called Murder, Bury, Win, where the premise is to kill someone. It's like a board game where you kill someone and then you try to get away with it and then you win. So their research was probably crazier.
Yeah. We should call each other. We'll be like, what did you find out? FBI will have a lot to talk about then.
And on that interview, I had asked like how they would get rid of a body and get away with it. So everything you've just said is something that's very fun for me.
Oh my God.
I'm glad I'm not the only one doing that.
He's like, oh, please explain.
No,
please, I want to hear more about the sludge.
It is interesting from sort of just a biological perspective. I mean, I think it's interesting. What you do with it is depends. That I can't speak for, but I'm sure that, I wouldn't be the only one, I'm sure, who's like, how do you go about doing that? Or like, what is that all about? When you read something and you're like, whoa, like, even with, as I said, like some of the stuff when I was doing the research on Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm just sitting there like, what? Like you sort of like, how did that work out? How does this? So, it's an interesting thing. And it's especially because it's something sort of outside of the realm of what normally in your day to day, like I'm not interacting with this kind of material very much. So it's a little bit of a foreign thing, but yeah, I think, well, good if they did their research, because that's what I agree with research. I think it's very important when you're in a real world setting.
Did you take any like dialogue from their statements or anything like that?
No, I didn't really. I mostly just used sort of the profiles, sort of combining methodology.
Somebody's calling my house phone. I forgot I had a house phone. Bring that up. Sorry, that was weird.
We're back in 1975 at
that
time.
And cell phones weren't around then. Yeah, I mostly just, I think, combined from my research the psychological profile of one and the methodology of the other, and if you kind of combined those elements together, like what kind of person you might, which I think is kind of the scariest version, because in my opinion, you have in Bundy someone very charismatic, somebody who arguably was a likable guy. I don't know, I wasn't there, but I've read things where he was very personable. And then Jeffrey Dahmer, sort of on the other end of that, I don't think he was a very personable guy. I think he was a very quiet, sort of maybe awkward or something like that. But his methodology was a little bit more thoughtful than Bundy's. It was a little bit more, he was trying to do something here. I don't understand or relate to it, but he had some system here in the disposal that was purposeful in how he was doing it. And what if we put that together? Was really, I think, to me, that's the scariest. Someone who like has an idea of what they're doing and can charm you into them doing it. I think that to me seemed like a very scary idea, because how do you avoid then finding yourself in a situation that's very scary? So that's really more what I took from that specific research, rather than stuff in their interviews. Although I did listen to Bundy had interviews that they were doing right before he was executed, I believe.
Bundy tapes.
Because they were trying to figure out if he would reveal, I think, where his victims were. And with Dahmer, I did a lot of reading the police reports, and just sort of getting a sense of these guys through that was helpful, but I didn't directly pull anything from those documents.
Okay. Thank you very much for taking us down that rabbit hole. That was
Yeah,
fun.
sure.
So I'd love to ask the song at the end of the film, and during the credits, "Vehicle" by the Ides of March. Was that hard to get for this?
You take this, Nance.
It was oddly easier than I anticipated. I knew from the beginning that I wanted that song. Almost from the very beginning, as I conceived the idea, I thought that was the song I wanted. I even said to Heather, this is, I was prepared that it was gonna cost a lot, or I was worried that it was gonna cost a lot. So much so that as we approached the time when we were gonna reach out, I had the thought I don't even know if I verbalized this to Heather, but I had the thought in my head of, if it falls in this range, I will pay for it. Like if it falls in this reasonable range, but is like beyond what we were prepared to do, I was like, I will. It was a very reasonable, I think it was like a $1,000 a year for the festival stuff, because we got the license just for festival use. So if something more came of the project, for example, I'd have to go back and we'd have to discuss like what are the terms, etc. But for what we knew we were going to be doing in the short term was the festival use license. So I reached out to Concord Music. I think has the rights to both, because they represent Jim Pederick, who's the writer of the song, and I had no idea what was going to happen, and they were very nice to work with. And when I asked, this is what we're interested in, it was not outrageous. I'm thinking it could be like 10,000. I don't know. Like I've never purchased a song, let alone like a song that is so well known or was popular at the time. So that I was prepared that it could maybe not work. And if it wasn't going to work, what's the realm that I'll make it work because I feel passionate about it. And then from there, if it didn't fit in that, I would have had to move on probably, but it was actually not as challenging. And I say this, I've said this in the past, whenever somebody's interviewing, there's never a harm in asking for what you want. I can ask and the answer could be no, it could be that it winds up being too much money. But if I think it's an unattainable thing such that I don't ask, then I'll never get it. So at least if you throw it out there, the answer may still be no, but what have you lost from asking? So I tried a lot, I think, to apply that in the process of making this film. And I think in more than just this example, it worked out in our benefit, and we got something further or more or at all that maybe seemed a bit like a stretch. And half the time it wasn't nearly the stretch I thought it probably would be. So that's one thing I just say for anybody who could maybe listening to this, who's a producer or a director or whatever, and has something that they really want, but put in their mind, maybe it's going to be really hard. You never know. And sending an email and it's off. Like that's not, you haven't lost very much. And if it works out, and that's amazing. So I think like now that's my gospel. I shout that from the rooftops. There's no harm in asking. So,
that's your shouting voice.
Yeah, my shouting voice is very timid.
Just imagining like a mouse on the rooftop.
There's no harm in asking.
You can do it.
Gotta be in a cartoon now, Nancy. No, I don't. Yes. Did you have any backup songs for it that you were considering? No. Okay.
No, I mean, I loved the music we have in our bar scene, which was from the 70s too. The one when we're walking in, Daniel
Hrdlicka. It's a Czech name, I think. And I used to live in Prague, so you'd think I would be able to get the pronunciation like slightly, but not really. We found that was maybe slightly harder somehow. That the song that we used to transition from the exterior into the bar, it's from the 70s, and it was a song that was, I think, popular on like local in like Cleveland,
Ohio or something.
They were a Cleveland-based band, and it was a song that had gained some kind of local popularity. But the group
Circus was the band.
And the group didn't make, I think, subsequent albums, or it never really took off like to the degree that it could have. But I was trying to find something for that transition. I was like, maybe we could find some lesser known song that's still from the 70s that would like lend the authenticity or credibility to this moment that could be easy, maybe not a challenge, maybe be easier to nab if it's not such a widely popular song, for example. And I found that my mom and I was like, Mom, I'm tasking you, because my mother worked a lot for us as well. She's a lawyer. So I was like, can you email about song rights? Because you can sound more serious than I can. Like, lawyerly stuff, and I am not. So she was often like my sort of like sidekick tag team with like more of that stuff where I'm at home and I'm like, I'm going to try and find this. And I'm like, Lou, can you try and find this too? So we happened to find on the same like internet thread this song, and the people like we couldn't figure out like where to find them. So we're called like is it like ASCAP, like to get the right, we're like on the website. We called somebody from ASCAP or whatever, and they're like, I don't know who it is, but let's just try Googling. We found the guy on Facebook. I reached out, and it like was amazing. So we had like a bunch of things. That was a really fun one. That worked out, and Dan is such a nice guy,
and he's been really supportive of the project too.
Absolutely.
They're glad their song is just getting another life, it's cool, and it's a great song. That could have been a great closing credit song if we
Yeah,
could, you know what I mean? Like,
I think that at the point in which we got there, right before we got to this point in production, I don't think I had conceived really any music, let alone like a potential replacement for my dream song. But once we started then trying to find that, for example, that one other sort of song that we could maybe get that's from that period, it was as Heather says, it was a consideration of, if it didn't work out for that end credit song, maybe we could shift that to there and figure out a different transition song. But I happen to think that it plays really, really perfectly going into the bar scene. And this is just a side note, because I have listened to this film probably a billion times. The conflict, or the scene where she's sort of having a discussion with Bruce, the character of Bruce, when he's kind of coming on a little heavy-handed, there's a line in that song, it just goes, stop. It just keeps saying stop, because the song is stop, wait, and listen.
Listen, yeah.
And on a repeat at some point in that conversation, the song is just like stop, and it's repeating the word stop multiple times until the song ends. And for me, just as an like if you can call this an Easter egg, because it's not, it just really lined up so nicely with this character who wants to get out of the situation and is probably thinking, I wish this guy would stop. And the song reinforcing that tone on a very like subliminal sort of messaging kind of way was like the perfect happy accident that I always get excited when I'm like, oh, it's that part where it's sort of so
I like
we
that.
did.
I'm gonna rewatch that scene then, just to see and get the idea of the song. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, my last one before we wrap up, I had noticed that your first film, Nancy, was set in the 60s, and this is set in the 70s. So is the 80s next, or what era do you want to explore next?
I always joke with Heather that I'm like gonna just have her be in like, because Heather was in that film as well. I'm gonna have her just be in every film until we're in the future. So I don't know. There is a story idea that I have been thinking about that would be the 80s. Heather knows nothing about that. Nobody knows anything about this. This it's sort of from my mom's past life. When she was working in the 80s, a bunch of her, she's a lawyer, a bunch of her law partners, they would always get into these like little side ventures apparently. And one of them was a TV pilot called What's My Beef? So I'm dying to take the concept of like a bunch of lawyers going into this like side hustle of a TV show that they don't know anything about producing, call it What's My Beef, so what's more 80s than a show called What's My Beef? So that is like what my sort of, if I'm going to do a short, I was like, Mom, I have to, like, I'm stealing your life story. I'm stealing this. Like, no, make your feature. And I'm like, okay, I will. But just in case I need to do another short because this is too perfect, What's My Beef will be the next thing you see of me out there in the world. People will be like, what? The tone is wrong. She does other types of movies than What's My Beef. But I think it's too funny. Like I could see it conceptually, I could see it being really playful, but it would be just a very different tone.
Yeah.
So Heather's probably surprised that I had an answer to that question, because I've never talked about this.
We just joke about it all the time. I've not heard an actual answer yet. I'm very excited.
So this is, it's something I knew about, like had happened. And then more recently, I'm like, maybe I should just keep rolling through the decades.
Yeah.
It could, because period pieces are challenging, but they're also so fun. It's so rewarding. And I personally don't like the advent of social media or cell phones in cinema. I think it first of all complicates storytelling from one perspective. People have too much information immediately all the time. So if you're telling a story, that doesn't always like inure to your benefit. But I just also don't like, watching something and seeing, a text message. I'm then trying to figure out what the text message is saying, or they're using like a little blurbs to show you. It takes me out a little bit. So I've really enjoyed working on the period pieces. I'm not just trying to torture myself or my performers or my crew. I think there's a lot of richness when you're exploring a different time, and it's exciting, you know, other people watching these films and saying like, you really nailed this period. Like my mom and her friends, they're like, that's what it was like. Like hearing that is the best thing I've ever heard. It's like, that's what it was really like, is the hugest compliment. But I mean, I don't know if I'm going to give up on period pieces so easily.
Okay, I love it.
To my own chagrin, probably.
Kind of like an exclusive for what you're working on next. Where's my
Yeah.
beef?
That's definitely one I would play with. I'm not sure that it's happening yet, but I love the concept.
Okay. Now,
and the title.
Oh, for sure.
The title's perfect.
It's great. Is there a decade that you would most want to explore, or was the 70s it for you that you love the most?
I don't, I always think to myself, I really like sort of immediately post-war. I like, the film we did with Heather in the 60s, we set it in that time period because it was right, sort of after that sort of blissful, how we think, and it probably wasn't, but we look back at sort of this sort of American fantasy of what home life and work life and gender role, like it sort of presents, you watch Leave It to Beaver and it feels so idyllic, sort of like idyllic time period. And the 60s was something between like this idealism that came after the war, where people are happy we're no longer in the war and we can focus on growing a family and we can do all these things and there's prosperity. Something between that and, this Vietnam era gender politics, that was sort of the 60s. But I love kind of the fantasy of what was that idealism. I don't think it was really ideal, but I think I always had this sort of thought of, wouldn't it be nice to drive in your like station wagon and be sauntering around making casserole, like something about the fantasy element of that more than, maybe like the Revolutionary Road, like we're really not happy kind of element. I think it's kind of interesting. Or even maybe Prohibition era is a lot of fun. Those kinds of things I think are very interesting, and exploring like the different dynamics of those time periods. But any time period is interesting for different reasons. And all of them are interesting from a perspective of creating a universe and characters from that universe. And there's nothing like walking through like that shoot. I don't know if you can hear my dog, she's barking, sorry about that.
I just was muted, so I wasn't talking.
There's nothing like walking through like a set and feeling like seeing everybody in their characters. It's so cool. It was so cool. Like if I showed up and
was so cool.
If everybody was wearing like jeans and a t-shirt, you make a great project, but there's just something so rich about like walking through and seeing the whole thing come to life. You almost start to fantasize like you're there. And you're not, but I wore like bell-bottom pants and a tie-dye t-shirt, and I was like, yeah, I live here now. I live in the 70s. So
it goes a long way in helping an actor get into character too, when it's done well, when all the sets and the costumes and it's all right. It takes you out of yourself, even more so. And it's a really fun way to go to work.
And everybody did a good job. I mean, Heather did amazing. Everybody did a wonderful job. And I think you believed, I believed, I was there. So, I believed these characters. And I think that you couldn't ask for more, like just for these characters to be authentic and believable. And everybody really went into that place and pulled out from it. What is this person like? It was amazing. It was really, really a lot of fun. And I would totally do it again, all the time, every movie, maybe. I don't know. It's really something cool.
Yeah. And just hearing all of that must just be such a goosebumps kind of moment, just being like, wow, I created 1975 in 2020 or 2021.
Yeah.
Right.
It was exciting. I mean, when we were doing the fittings, everyone came to my house and like seeing, I think specifically Craig Mungavin, who played Bruce, when he walked out, He's wearing like white leather shoes. And I was just like, this is weird, but it's amazing. There's something surreal. And then you throw them in the environment it was very exciting. Very, you see it and you're like, oh my God, it's happening. You know,
Awesome.
even though you're producing it, it doesn't stop it from being like a thrill.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm excited for people to see it, hopefully on the next festival stop. Don't know if we know where that is.
We do,
next.
but we're not allowed to say yet. But
Okay.
hopefully we'll be able to announce in the next week or so. We're pretty excited about this next one too. So, and then
Okay.
more, we'll see.
Okay, awesome. I'm happy to put a link to where it plays next in the post as well. So
thank you. Well, in the meantime, you can go to victimnumber6.com, victimno6.com, and we do have all of our upcoming screenings on there as well.
perfect, cool. So
Right?
I'll-
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
on there, right?
to
We've been
update
updating things. There's a lot to update right now, which is a good problem to have. But
Yeah.
So Nancy Menagh, who writes, directs, produces Victim Number 6, and Heather Brittain O'Scanlon, who plays Donna and also produces Victim Number 6. Thank you both for chatting with me on the Filmcraziest Show.
thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for
It was a
having us.
pleasure.
Cool. Hey, if you stuck around, thanks so much for listening to this podcast. If you want to see more interviews from me, just check out my website, filmcraziest.com, I have a bunch of interviews on my channel if you're watching this on YouTube. You can also check out Nancy and Heather's film, Victim Number 6, at the links below. Thank you for watching.